Well, of course, through the day of the 20th, in Europe, there was nothing. But in the morning, when I woke up on April 21st, I'd already got a bunch of emails from people in the US, of course, asking whether or not this was the event I've been referring to. Well, initially I said, I don't think so. And I was biased by the fact that I have spent 20 years in the oil industry, working for a company called Schlumberger, who, as you're going to see, had a very significant role to play on the BP Deepwater horizon, which is why I'm BP's worst nightmare, really, because with the background that I have, I've been able to do the forensic analysis based on information that is generally in the public domain. There's a couple of things I'm going to share with you through the course of the evening which came to me through my contacts in the oil industry and in the Gulf Coast area. But generally, the vast majority of the information I'm going to share with you, you will find in the public domain. And of course, as is always the case, I mean, I don't expect anybody to take anything I say at face value anyway, because that's not my purpose. That's the purpose of the mainstream media. The purpose of the mainstream media is to control the narrative, to tell people what to think. That's absolutely not my agenda, quite the opposite. I'm really just here to sow the seeds and encourage people to do their own research and come to their own conclusions about events. Even a few weeks later, I was scheduled to speak at a conference in California, in Santa Cruz, a deep geopolitics conference. And even then, I resisted, albeit there was a temptation, but I resisted the temptation to say that this was anything other than a series of unfortunate incidents. The reason being is that because at the time I hadn't got sufficient evidence to state categorically that this was a contrived event. 1 week after I came back from California, though, final piece of the jigsaw fell into place, and I knew at that moment this was a contrived event. Now, the reason that I put this newsletter out on April the 19th was because the feeling that I had that morning, I had once before. When I had it before, it was about 10 days before I was scheduled to give a presentation in Chicago on the weekend, 3rd and 4th of June 2006. And about 10 days before I went to Chicago, I had this real sense of foreboding that the guys who think they're the rightful rulers were going to launch a forced flag attack on the 6th of June 2006. I didn't think they were going to let the 6th of the 6th of the 6th pass without leaving some kind of calling card. It was too much of a temptation for them. So I didn't know where to start, so I just sat down at the computer, and as many of you know, well, I lived in the States for 4 years, so I thought, if I was in the States, 6th of the 6th of the 6th, I googled the zip code, 60606. I had no idea where it was. It came up, Sears Tower, Chicago. I thought, oh my God. So I thought, no, this is outrageous. But then I thought, maybe it's 60666. Let me see where that is. Well, that was O'Hare Airport, Chicago. And then I thought, well, maybe they're going to get really cute. So I googled 60018, 3 times 6. And that was the zip code of the fucking hotel where I was giving the presentation. So I thought, oh, shit. By the way, the reason I'm telling you this is because this presentation I gave is actually on the web. It was a joint presentation I gave with Annie Machon on the Saturday morning of June the 3rd. If you don't want to watch the whole of the presentation, about 25 minutes in, I get into what I'm telling you now. And there was a number of people in the audience with newsletters, with blogs, with podcasts, and there was a guy that some of you might have heard of sitting right at the front of the stage here, because it's a packed room. There's a guy called Alex Jones. Yeah, he paid me a massive compliment, an absolutely massive compliment. I was the only speaker through the whole weekend. He didn't interrupt. Mind you, he was sitting right there. But no, he did the business too. I mean, he put word out. Anyway, the word got out during the day that I made this statement, this assumption, and somebody had fed it out to the local news crews. Anyway, but when I came down to breakfast the following morning, I was asked if I'd give the presentation again, and this time it was filmed, and they put out a short news clip. Now, you won't find that news clip anywhere on the web, and if you do, let me know, because I've looked, I can assure you. But there's nothing from the Chicago News or any printed news that shows anything about that presentation, but the presentation is up on the web. Anyway, as you will know, nothing happened. And they did put out on the local news, by the way, about a 30-second slot saying this guy had come over from Britain, but he was talking at a 9/11 truth conference, so they're all a bunch of nutters anyway. And he predicted that there was going to be an event at Sears Tower. Well, one of the reasons I got to tell you that I felt so comfortable and confident to give this presentation was because there were a few similarities. Because I discovered that a few weeks before I honed in on Sears Tower, a guy called Larry Silverstein had just taken out a lease on Sears Tower. And I thought, oh, this is weird, because this is the guy who took out the lease on the World Trade Center complex 6 weeks before 9/11. And then I discovered that the weekend that I was in Chicago, a whole bunch of exercises were planned around Sears Tower, and the Sears Tower was not open to the public or to workers for that weekend, which is exactly what occurred prior to 9/11. So, as you all know, of course, nothing happened. Sears Tower is still standing. But now go Google Sears Tower terror attack. Because what you will find is the reports that appeared in the US media, I think on the 17th. I think the first reports appeared on the 17th, but it basically went viral throughout the US around about the 22nd, 23rd of June 2006. And what you will find are the reports of a terror cell that was arrested in Miami with detailed plans of Sears Tower. So, I don't claim any special insight. It is simply a question of getting into the way these guys think. And I liken it to like this multi-dimensional chess. Now, if you can imagine sitting down at a chessboard, having never been shown the game before, never been told the rules, but told you've got to play your opponent. I mean, you're going to lose. Time after time after time. You're going to get hammered. You're probably not even going to take a piece because you don't even know the moves. But after a while, you're going to start to learn the moves. You're going to be able to start to know how the game is played. You might even manage to take a couple of your opponent's pieces. And eventually you're going to start to work out how he thinks. And you're going to start to predict his moves. And then you're going to realise that actually your opponent is actually quite limited in the number of variations in his moves. And so ultimately you can actually get ahead of the game and start developing your own strategy to beat him. Well, that's pretty much what I do. You know, by focusing on the deep geopolitical global agenda, it's really a question of starting to get inside these guys' heads and predict what you think is going to happen. And so far, it's been right more often than I've been wrong. And the 19th of April for me, or 20th of April, this is the 20th, you know, no great surprise. Even though it took me 4 weeks, a full 4 weeks, to actually pull all the evidence together. It's the Queen's birthday, it's Hitler's birthday. April the 19th was also the day the current Pope was voted into office. April the 19th is a very, very significant day in the occult belief system of these guys. And I talk a lot about this. I mean, it's one of the DVDs that I produced a long time ago, 4 years ago, called The Hidden Agenda, where I talk in a lot of detail about the belief system of these guys, which is very, very different from anything, and it's of course it's meant to be. So that anybody who suggests that these guys believe the things I know they believe, they would be considered to be absolutely crazy. There we go. So let's have a look at this. Let's have a look at what occurred. I'm going to share with you some of the things. I don't have time to go through the whole list, but I'm going to share with you some of the things as to why it is that I believe that this was a contrived event. Not least, Tony Hayward. By the way, I saw that somebody has set up a Facebook website, and the title of the Facebook website is every time I see Tony Hayward, I want to punch him in the nose. But this guy's behaviour in the aftermath was atrocious. I mean, it was appalling. You know, a first-line supervisor would have taken more responsibility than this guy. In the DVD that I produced for this presentation, which we recorded on July the 23rd, which is very significant again, we'll come to that in the second half of the evening. But in that presentation, in the DVD, I include a number of clips of this guy, basically in the early hearing, saying such things as, I can't answer that question, I wasn't involved in the discussion. I mean, for God's sake, this is the chief executive officer. You know, basically anybody, I mean, it wouldn't even necessarily be the CEO, but a senior manager who had the responsibility, you know, would have immediately been on the phone. As soon as he heard that this had gone down, He'd have been on the phone, getting his immediate team together, pulling in all the experts he needed to understand what had happened, why it had happened, and what needed to be done to effectively address the problem. So Tony Hayward was like, sorry, I can't answer that. And you can hear on the transcripts, you can hear basically the guys who are asking the question saying, we don't believe this. How do you expect us ever to find out what occurred if you're stonewalling us all the time? Well, I don't believe for one moment that this guy was involved in the planning of the event. But he knew something was going on. He absolutely knew that things were going on behind his back. He didn't know what, but he would have been aware, probably simple things like conversations stopping when he came into the room, or people quickly flicking off their computer screens. He definitely got wind that something was not right.